Hi, and welcome to the Everything Voiceover Podcast. I'm Tcode, an African voiceover talent from Nigeria, and this is my podcast where I take on voiceover topics from an African perspective. Sit back and enjoy this episode. Hi guys, hello guys, my name is Tcode, and this is me recording my first voiceover podcast. Yep. In my mind, I'm not going to delete anything that I say here because I want it to be as genuine as possible. Actually, this is not my first time recording a podcast, but this is going to definitely be my first episode. I'm a Nigerian voiceover artist, and I've been having this in mind to do for a long time now, having my podcast for voiceovers. I've done a couple of podcasts in the past, but this is the first one I'll be doing specifically for voiceovers. And I decided I had decided to do this. It should be about a year ago, yeah. But now it's over a year now, and I haven't put out an episode. I have to be honest. 2 weeks ago, I did record an episode, but it didn't come out well. So I decided right now that I'm just going to get into the studio and record an episode. Yes, so this is me doing what I got to do. So welcome to my world. This is the Everything Voiceovers Podcast, the African perspective. And the purpose of this podcast is basically to help African voice actors and Nigerian, because I'm a Nigerian, right? So Nigerian voice actors too, or people who are willing to get into the voiceover industry, find their way, find their balance, know a little bit more about the voiceover industry, and also help people outside the continent of Africa to understand what the industry is like in Africa and then Nigeria too. Well, you might ask, who am I? And that's the purpose of this episode, actually. I'm here to introduce myself, and for those who don't know me, yeah, my name is Tcode. Actually, I'm Tolu Kolade. That's my real name, but then Tcode is what people call me by. I've been an OAP for many years, and just last year I decided to step down from being an OAP and just focus fully on voiceovers. But I'll be telling you a bit about myself in this episode. Hopefully, yes, this is my first episode, and the next episodes will be having to talk about other, serious things. Yeah, this too is serious, Okay, so voiceovers for me, I would say it's something that started very, very way back when I was quite young, but I never knew it was what it was until when I started getting closer to broadcasting. I remember back in the days while I was still a kid, and I'll watch cartoons, and I loved to hear those cartoons done in either British or American English. Of course, those were the things that we're exposed to. I grew up in Nigeria, in Lagos, and those cartoons made childhood fun. And there's this thing: if you grew up in Nigeria, even in present day Nigeria, there's the challenge of electricity. There is no stable electricity. We call it epileptic power supply. Yeah, where we probably have light or electricity, as you would call it. We call it light here, randomly. So we call it. So you have light for say an hour, 2, 5, 3. 5 is even a luxury, right? And then you don't have light for many hours again. So during the times where there wasn't light and my brothers and I needed to catch some fun, I come up with these characters, the same characters we're watching on TV, and I begin to dramatize them, act like though I was those characters, and also speak like them because I was trying to, act the characters to my brothers. I needed them to believe I was that character. I wanted to see the smile on their face. I wanted to take away that boredom. I wanted them to, enjoy it with me and feel as though they had watched the original stuff, which I know, it's quite impossible. But then I tried my best. So that got me engaged in listening attentively and trying to understand how these characters spoke. And I'm talking about as young as age 8, 7, thereabout. I would say 7, 8, yeah. And I'd been doing these things since then. So there's no light. I'll just start acting as though I was Pinky and the Brain or Biker Mice, or those were the cartoons I watched then. Johnny Bravo, So I will do those characters, mimic the voices. I would also buy comic books and read those things as though I was those persons. We had the Spider-Man's, Hulk. In fact, the cartoons were available to Batman, and there was this Nigerian one we used to read then, Super Strikers, so I'll do that. Now, I had to tell that story because that formed my earliest journey in voiceovers, because characterizing or playing those roles taught me how to be flexible with my voice, with my tone, and I could go up and I go down. All of that came with acting, cartoons. And then I began to pay more attention to anything audio around me, music and voices. My father would watch a lot of BBC and CNN, and I would pay attention and listen to that too. And if it were football we're watching, I'll listen to the commentary. I paid a lot of attention. In fact, I was exposed to a lot of British content, really. And that also helped in my formation of learning to speak well. Because at some point, I had to take the decision to consciously speak well and not just speak randomly, or shabbily because I was with my friends or my family. There's this thing about the way you speak when you with your closest friends. You probably are not so conscious of what you're saying or cautious of it. So I decided I was going to be very intentional with the way I spoke. Well, cut long story short, I had a very good oratory ability. And by the time I got to the university, even though I didn't study mass comm as you would have thought, or English or whatever it is, I studied philosophy. But I began to do voiceovers for the school radio back in the days, and they loved my voice. So they gave me a slot on radio, and I was doing a radio show, I think 2 radio shows at the time. And when I graduated, before I went for service, because here in Nigeria, there's something you do when you school in the university after that, or you go for a 1-year service. You serve the government, as it were, and they pay you. Yeah, so before my 1-year service, I worked with the radio then as an intern, and I served. While serving, I worked in a TV station, also did a few of radio, but all those times, my voice was the big deal. It was what was getting me those recognition, and of course, I was using my voice to do promos for those stations and all of that. And it was a good experience for me, but at those times, I never really knew there was something called voiceovers. Even when I was serving, I didn't expressly know there was an industry for this. I thought it was just either actors or OAPs, radio personalities, radio presenters that would get into the studio and do those commercials that I'd see on TV. And I was a big fan of commercials too. I love them. Until I got fully employed, to start working on radio. And while I was on radio, almost every radio station I've worked with, I did radio imaging for them, station IDs, sweepers, jingles, and all of that. And I also did a lot of production. Yeah, so that was just my background to voice acting until at some point I told myself, I said, what makes some people get the jobs, to be the voiceover actor for the biggest brands that you see on TV? And I wanted to know how they got there. And I told myself I'm going to do everything possible. And I wanted to know what they knew. So I felt I need to learn this thing formally, right? So I started looking for ways to learn voiceovers. I also knew a bit about the Fivers and the Upwork, but it was quite a bit very not so easy to navigate. Yeah. So I decided to learn voiceovers, and checking online, I think this was 2020, I found the voiceover workshop. And that was a game changer for me, because when I enrolled with the voiceover workshop, I think it was just a week training, and it was online. That was around the time that the pandemic was still on, but then I enjoyed learning, and I met some extraordinary voice actors in Nigeria that coached us, and even outside Nigeria, and that really broadened my mind. Gave me the information, at least the necessary information I needed to be confident about voiceovers and say, oh, I want to get into this thing full time, or really I want to do this thing and call myself a voiceover actor. So that was the journey for me. And I also started doing voiceover for not just radio, but for commercials, for clients, most especially while I was on radio. And Fiverr exposed me to international clients too. I also made some efforts to reach out to some YouTubers who I felt I could be the voice for their channel. One of them chose me, and we got working, and we're still working till date. You may want to guess which. But anyways, that sums up just the history of my voiceover journey. I've been doing a couple of things since then. Went ahead to do some considerable amount of good voiceovers, but not just that. I've also engaged in some competitions. I was the winner of the Nigerian voice acting contest. I am actually the winner of the first Nigerian voice acting contest, which happened in 2021 December. It wasn't late 2021, not December now. That's from October, November. Yeah. And it was a great thing for me. That also gave me publicity and all of that. And I've been very, very much engaged in many conversations across the voiceover industry in Nigeria. So if this were an interview, it'll be very interesting to get questions to me, and I'll answer them about my journey and certain things you want to find out. But I think this is just me explaining and telling you my story. There's a lot I haven't said. There's a lot you'll find out the more I have more episodes of this podcast. But it's always been my joy to do this, and we're gonna do it. Yeah, that's it. All right, guys. Well, there's no perfect way to end a voiceover podcast, is there? I don't know, but if there is any, you can reach out to me. The email is everythingvoiceovers@gmail.com, and I'd love to hear your feedback. Well, this is the first episode. Once again, my name is Tolu Kolade, and let me just say this as I close. I was dragging my feet about starting the recording of this voiceover until this morning. I was about leaving the house, and I heard a voiceover. No, not a voiceover. I heard a podcast by one of those that I respect. Is a great voiceover actor in the continent of Africa. He goes by the name Chilu Lemba. And he said many stuff in that inspired me. And I was like, yeah, I should just start it. I should just do it already, right? So here I am doing my first episode of Everything Voiceovers Podcast. So guys, we're going to do more. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I don't know, but I think I have gotten it out of my chest. Well, I'm going to be, hopefully next week I should drop another episode. My name is Tcode, and this is the Everything Voiceovers Podcast, the African Perspective. Catch you next week. Not so bad. All right, bye guys. Cheers. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, leave a comment, and tell someone about it. Follow the podcast on Everything Vo's on all social media platforms. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode.